There are some times here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel when we get together with Paul Finebaum and discuss the Saturday that was. Sometimes there's more anticipation than others. This is one of those after a remarkable week 10, after a stunning week 10. Use whatever adjective you want to describe it. But Paul, good afternoon, good morning, happy clock change. What a Saturday we had, not only in the SEC, but a couple of results that are going to shake things up the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, the game of the century did not live up to it, but the nightcap did. As once again, Alabama losing becomes the story of the day, and it was epic and it was memorable. And Matt, it's hard not to feel a sea change in the SEC this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're consuming this, with Alabama, for all intents and purposes, being eliminated from the race. And I won't waste a lot of time on historical perspective, but this is the first time since 2010 they've essentially been out of it before Thanksgiving, and they have not been out of it many times, as you well know.
Yeah, it's the only time they missed the playoff, the 2019 year, the Joe Burrow LSU team that ran through the SEC West on their way to a national championship. So let's start there with Alabama, LSU, overtime, Brian Kelly, play call. Let's play to win this thing now. Mason Taylor from Jaden Daniels. Let's start from the Alabama perspective for a minute, because that's where you went with it. Here's what I find surprising and a bit shocking here Sunday morning. We came into the season with the returning Heisman Trophy winner, with Jahmyr Gibbs, in my opinion, the best all-purpose back in college football. Will Anderson, the best overall player in college football. Dallas Turner, who's an absolute freak. With some people who cover this team whispering this could be one of the best Nick Saban teams we've seen. And yet you just put it out there. Paul, they're not going to be in the college football playoff. And to me, that is shocking.
It is. And Saban caught a lot of flack when he called last year a rebuilding year, even though they started the season #1. What he was really saying is this is not a rebuilding year. We've got it. And he was confident. And you can choose your words harshly, or you can be calm and say Nick Saban will recover from this. But I don't know the answer to that. I know he's wasted. The best quarterback perhaps in Alabama history, maybe one of the best defensive players, and you laid out the rest of the team, and it just seems a shame, quite frankly, if you look at it through Alabama, from an Alabama perspective, what has happened. And we can. I thought it was interesting last night. Nick Saban said, he wasn't really sure how to respond. He said, "I'm not second guessing anyone." Well, he ought to second guess himself, Matt, because this has been Nick Saban's worst coaching job at Alabama. This is, by my count, the fourth time. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 that he has been out coached. You go back to Sarkisian, Texas. Obviously, Jimbo Fisher out coached him. Josh Heupel. Add Brian Kelly to that list. Every once in a while you'll see Saban get outmaneuvered in a championship game against Dabo or somebody else, but this is now 4 times, and I'm stupefied when I see some of his decisions. The end of the Tennessee game, total mismanagement of the clock offensively, and disastrous defensive coverage on the back end. When Tennessee won the game, and last night twice he went for 2, and Matt, I don't care what the chart says. You're Nick Saban. You can make a judgment call. Again, I don't think the chart called for Brian Kelly to go for 2 to win the game, but that was his instinct, and Saban just doesn't seem to be coaching on instinct. He looked lost one time on the sideline. I think there was an interception, and he's like clapping. I don't want to make too much out of it, but there's no way you can't make too much out of it. It feels like the dynasty window is closing. It feels like this season has taken a turn, and I can't calculate what is going on or guess what is going on in Nick Saban's mind, but he looks miserable. And what I hear from my Alabama friends, and this is classic, we, meaning Alabama fans, need to fire the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. And you talk about that when you have a coach who's in transition. Is he going to make it? Is he not? Right. Get rid of the staff. This is Nick Saban. These are his guys. He's stuck with Pete Golden now for 5 years. he's all in on Bill O'Brien,
Yeah.
and Nick Saban's pretty late in his career to be firing assistants to save face, but that's what you're going to hear for the next few weeks.
Yeah, 2-point conversion conversation. Let's go there because Galloway and Dan Mullen, guys that I sat with for 16 hours on Saturday, when we were watching that, we were looking at it and both of them were saying it. And even you don't need to go for 2 when they went for 2, because what happens is it starts a pattern of chasing points.
Right.
You don't hit the first 2-point conversion. Now you lost a point that you would have gotten with the extra point, and now you got to go chase it again. So let's just go back into the game and not go for 2 on those 2 instances and kick the extra points. Well, guess what Will Reichert's field goal is time expires. It's for the win.
It's over.
And so you can get into all the books and charts and analytics. Well, it's for some reason in college football, and this is a much bigger picture conversation, but in some reason we've stopped looking at a decision that's going to bear seeds in the fourth quarter and started looking at right now, get the 2 now, get the 2 now. We've got many examples of how that's going to come back and get you. And now those decisions early in a game to not just kick the extra point and think about it big picture knocked Alabama out of the college football playoff. And we're sitting here this morning thinking, well, how in this game did Brian Kelly coach a better game, which he did, than Nick Saban?
Yeah, and again, you put your team on the defensive too when you don't get that. It's okay with giving them confidence, but there's just something about it. And I listen. We all know Nick Saban turned 71 this week. Everyone's looking for signs, but I hear things from people that know him very well. I hear things from inside that program, and there are whispers that this is not a diminished Nick Saban, but there's a fractional difference between this year and last year and the year before, and I think that's obvious. It's a cliche to say what I'm about to say, but if you want to see what Alabama football looked like during the absolute pinnacle of the Saban era a couple of years ago when they were in the championship game every year, just go over to Athens. That's what Nick Saban football looked like at its peak. It doesn't look like that anymore. And I don't think it's a lack of talent. There's plenty of talent there. It's a matter of putting people in the right position and getting them to play well. And there's some explosive players who are missing. Please don't misunderstand me. There's no way you can, when you look at Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs and Judy, it's an endless streak.
Jamison Williams, Jalen Waddle, all of them.
Mechie last year. These guys all made, and the guys on. I mean, but Brooks made a huge play yesterday. There were some big plays made, but I mean, that one play by Bryce Young.
Oh,
that was a Heisman moment, but the defense can't hold up, and we're seeing a lot of things changing in college football right now, and Nick Saban's program, it seems like it's regressing, and I know somebody's going to come out of their chair and go, "What are you talking about? They lost by a field goal to Tennessee, and they had a field goal that perhaps could have won it." But you're talking about 2 teams that Alabama should not be losing to.
Well, and you mentioned it a second ago, it's part of the storyline. Texas, Quinn Ewers goes out. They had to fight to get that win. And then now Texas A&M's awful. And with a competent
6 losses.
With a competent play calling quarterback, they could have beat him again in a game that they had no business hanging around. And so we have touched on this before, and I don't want to go dive too far down this path because I do want to get to LSU. We've talked about how the evolution of college football over the past few years, where players now have as much, if not a little bit more power than coaches now.
Mm-hmm.
And in a Nick Saban run program, it's this is mine. You were fortunate enough to be a part of what I'm going to provide you.
Exactly.
Now there's nicer cars in the parking lot. There's really nice, expensive suits. And now the players, I don't know if that's it, but something in the last few years has changed a little bit in the sport, which appears to have some kind of factor here.
Matt, you work at a big corporation where there are happy campers and disgruntled people. We have seen it all. And I'm about to say something that you may laugh at. Nick Saban seems like a disgruntled employee. Now, as I say that, he's the highest paid coach in college football. He's got a lifetime contract. What he's disgruntled about isn't his salary, isn't his contract. It's not his working conditions. He's disgruntled about the condition of college football.
Right.
He hates it. And I don't care what he says about NIL. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like giving players freedom. He doesn't like entitled players. And it just seems like what we saw him that night that created that firestorm that now seems like ancient history with Jimbo Fisher, that was really him talking. And I know that was real because I had heard the same thing from Nick Saban a couple of weeks earlier in a private phone conversation. I've spoken to other people in prominent positions connected to college football who have been at the other end of Nick Saban complaining about this and why can't this guy do that? And I just don't think he's been able to scrape that away because players are smart. They see what's going on. They know that whatever they get out of Alabama, it's because Nick Saban was forced into doing it to be competitive with Kirby Smart and everyone else. But I think it's, I mean, Brian Kelly's 10 years younger than Nick Saban. He's still in a pretty senior age group. He looks like a new man. Nick Saban looks like an old man.
Brian Kelly, let's switch gears to him. It's a perfect time to do it because I don't think there's ever been a more important play call in an opening season of a new coach's tenure than what Brian Kelly did at home last night and going for 2 points. He basically said, guys, we lost to Florida State. I know. We got our doors blown off against Tennessee. I know. But here's what I also know. I'm going to look at my team and say, guys, we're going to go win this thing right now. And if we don't, we went for it. But Brian Kelly, to me this morning, has more equity with a fan base than any team in the country based on one simple overtime call.
And he made a mistake against FSU because I think he had not quite made the transformation to LSU, but he understands those people. One thing about I lived in Louisiana, Matt. I covered LSU. I've been down there a million times as you have. They'll forgive you for throwing a punch and missing. But that's the nature of that part of the world. They would have loved him anyway. Hey, you're up against Nick Saban. Take a shot. If you knock him out, great. If you end up on your backside, well, we'll help you up and buy you a beer. He's a hero. I mean, I don't want to say that. We'll say. I mean, he's that will take him a long way through stormy weather in Baton Rouge because he did something that will forever be remembered, and he did it against the one guy he had to do it again. Nick Saban is the reason Brian Kelly is in Baton Rouge. Brian Kelly has lost to Nick Saban for a national championship. He's lost to him in the playoffs, and he knew to complete his chapter. It wouldn't be in South Bend. He had to come south and beat Nick Saban. He's done that now.
Yeah, and when you look at their schedule, they've got Arkansas, UAB, and Texas A&M. Barring any, and I'll say this to set that up. During Les Miles and during Ed Orgeron's save 2019, there was always a feeling that one of those teams would do something big and then the next week stub their toe against a team they had no business doing it against. Where I will buy in with Brian Kelly being the legitimate change LSU's needed is if they go beat an Arkansas team they should handily beat. UAB is not going to be a problem. And then the Texas A&M game, if they get through those 3 games, part 1, they're headed to the SEC championship. Part 2 changes in order because they put their foot down against teams they're better than.
I will say this now. I'll try not to make too much out of a game that most people in the country don't even realize is happening. But the Arkansas game is extremely tricky.
The boot.
And it's even trickier because Arkansas just blew it yesterday against Hugh Freeze's Liberty team, which is really good, as you know. And I think that they made the Arkansas. I mean, forget you're going to be doubly mad, but I mean Arkansas's entire existence is going to be on the line Saturday, and they can wash away. They've lost now 2 games on the final play against A&M and now against Liberty, and they deserve to lose against Liberty. That was just a miserable performance. But yeah, but even if that game doesn't go well, it's still been a remarkable year, and nobody's ever going to forget Saturday night in Tiger Stadium.
So it sounds like to me, are you ready to pencil LSU in as the SEC West champion, or you still think there's enough there? Because Ole Miss, Alabama play this week. I mean, there's still enough there, but where do you see that?
Certainly the odds favorite, because I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in Oxford yet, because you really don't know where Alabama is going to be. I mean, I know it's a statistics say Alabama is the best money buy in Vegas the week after a loss.
Yeah.
But this is not exactly your grandfather's loss here. This is the end of the year, the end of the run for this year, and I don't know what Nick Saban can say that will matter right now.
Can you and I both agree, and then we'll move to Georgia, Tennessee. Can you and I both agree that Lane would have rathered Alabama coming off a win than a loss?
Yeah, I think he was kicking the television last night, because he's in spite of, if you forget Twitter for a second, which is not real, there's not that much love between Lane and Nick Saban. You would think so if you look at Lane's handle, but Lane's probably more upset now that game, a win over Alabama, doesn't put him in the SEC championship game than even the dynamics of the personalities.
Yes, I'll walk you through that real quick. If you're watching, remember, Ole Miss already lost to LSU. Even a win against Alabama, LSU holds the tiebreaker. People see the 2 losses for LSU moot because Florida State's out of conference. So that's where that game goes. Before we get to Georgia, Tennessee, because you touched on it, I'll touch on it with you quickly. If Auburn is not already making an offer for Hugh Freeze to be their head coach, I have no idea what they're doing. What more does this guy need to prove that he can coach football and win games? Going to an SEC stomping grounds and getting a win with Liberty.
Yeah, I don't remember ever a coach who was in position to try to get a job to punctuate that any more than yesterday, because here you got the Auburn folks sitting at home going, oh my goodness, this guy really is something. And I mean, I was talking to Pete Thamel yesterday in Athens, and he was speculating Matt Rule and Lane. He even mentioned Bill O'Brien, which I tried not to laugh when he said that, and Hugh Freeze. I mean, Hugh has a lot of baggage. Okay, that's not breaking news, but winning matters more than anything else in college football, and he has won at a very high level.
Georgia, Tennessee, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. And Paul, for me now, Georgia did yesterday all they needed to do for me to take a step back and say, yeah, those are still the kings of college football. Doubt us against Kent State because we looked sloppy. I know we almost went to Missouri and lost, but guess what? We're still the kings because our coaching staff and our defense shut down the most prolific offense in college football, and we did so quite easily.
Yeah, and I would tell you, and I was with Kirby Smart late Friday, and he's a hyper guy, and he's intense, and I've never seen him more relaxed. And I started thinking he really likes where he is, and I think what happened was, yeah, we talked off the air about the Alabama Tennessee game, and I think he went back and watched that game and said, Alabama should have won this game 100 times, and he knew what he had to do, and he had the players to do it, and he made every right call. And I know somebody might put your ESPN.com on your phone this morning. Oh, 27-13 must have been a pretty good game. No, it was not. I mean, it was an epic beatdown. It could have been significantly worse, and probably should have been. Tennessee, took a punch to the gut. And Kirby Smart is right back to where a lot of his fans thought they would be, but I frankly wondered about it, because after a national championship and after a pretty good season, we can finally quit worrying about Stetson Bennett being able to handle the moment.
Yeah, I was talking about the statistic that made me do a dog head tilt going into that game. Who'd have thought? And this is true. Stetson Bennett had more passing yards than Hendon Hooker going into the game. Yeah, it's Hendon Hooker in the Tennessee offense and a Heisman Trophy and this, that, and the other. But anybody who just wanted to find a reason to doubt Georgia after yesterday and what they did. But this begs the question now for Tennessee, because I'm one of those that says you can't go from number one and being the clear-cut number one to just falling off the radar. Where do you assess Tennessee now? I wouldn't be surprised if they went from 1 to 5, but I also wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the year we're talking about both Georgia and Tennessee still in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean they're in a really good spot right now because their schedule is easy remaining. They have one game on the road that matters against South Carolina, and I'll spare you the Saturday night at Williams-Brice because you've been there about a million times.
Right.
So I think that they're going. They got a tremendous break yesterday with Clemson getting knocked out. That was a big deal. TCU. It's hard. TCU's got such a gauntlet the next few weeks. So if TCU gets knocked out of this thing, then they're right back in a position to snare number 4.
Yeah, there's so much football left to be played, and a one-loss team in the SEC, Ohio State, Michigan's going to take care of itself. TCU, and like you said, they're round robin. That's probably going to take care of itself. Can someone rise up? UCLA, USC from the Pac-12, Oregon from the Pac-12. I mean, look, there's enough left to know that something else big is going to happen because that's the way this thing always shakes out. And you brought it up there, and we'll get out of here on this one. If there was one team that people were like, what? It was when Clemson was 4th in the first playoff rankings. And what do we always tell people? Relax. It's going to take care of itself. They've got Notre Dame this week. We'll see. And honestly, for me, all the Notre Dame game did was prove what a lot of us thought about Clemson, where they're not what their record or ranking indicated.
Well, in the offseason, Dabo Swinney bet on himself. He elevated coordinators, most of which nobody had ever heard of before. And it's to be determined long term whether that was the right call. But short term, this has not been a very good season for Clemson, in spite of a pretty good record with only one loss. But they've had so many narrow escapes, and you could feel it coming. And I'm not too surprised. I know you're not, and they're gone. And the idea that here we are heading into the second weekend in November, and Clemson and Alabama are gone. That is a paradigm shift in college football. And I felt last year I said this kind of just more for alliteration than for anything else that Dabo's dynasty was done. I said it on one of the ESPN chat shows, and it got tweeted out quickly. It's true. It is over from the perspective of them being in the championship game in the Final Four every year now. That's 2 years in a row that they're, or is it 2? Yeah, 2 years in a row that they're out. Yeah. And it's a bigger blow to the ACC.
Yeah.
Whose commissioner was not in favor of the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, you mentioned it there because ACC now, it looks as if it'll be Clemson, North Carolina in the ACC championship game. And in North Carolina, they do it their own way. Drake May is an absolute superstar. Defense leaves a lot to be desired. But you mentioned the two coordinators, Tony Elliott, who's at Virginia, who gave North Carolina a little bit of a run, and then Brent Venables, who's at Oklahoma. They go down to Baylor yesterday. So, I mean, look. It really is. If I had to treetop week 10, obviously I'd give Brian Kelly the Superstar Award. I'd give Kirby Smart the, hey, it's my college football planet now. But I would also say, to your point, 2 dynasties from 2014 to now that have been in the college football playoff conversation and in the playoff every year, they're gone. And to me, that's the biggest headline of this week, is that we are not going to have a T-shirt printed with the college football playoff semifinals with Clemson and Alabama on it.
No, and that's a big deal, but it's hard. It's hard for me to get away from where exactly is Nick Saban right now in his career, and I know that we know Dabo Swinney is still a young man, and whatever he does, no one is concerned about him. But I think you have to legitimately be concerned about this Alabama program, because they're not a 10-2 program. That doesn't make their fans happy. They are they're at the pinnacle, and you think about it now, and since 17, they have had one national championship, and that's 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. That's really good for most programs. That's terrible for Alabama in the Saban era. And yeah, I mean, a lot of Belichick Saban comparisons, but Saban still has the top quarterback in the game. And this is it's gonna be very interesting, Matt, just to see how he reacts, how he handles being off Broadway.
Well, we will handle it as we always do here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. We will review, we will preview, because the first weekend of November did not disappoint. Here we go. We move on to week 11. And as you would imagine, based on what we saw this weekend, things will happen to shake this whole thing up again. And we'll be here to cover it for you. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. We'll see everyone next week here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.